Through you, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillors Beaver and Gray and Councillors Berry and Derbyshire are subbing.
Thank you. Item 1, minutes of the meeting Tuesday the 10th of August, pages 3 to 6. Can somebody move those? Thanks. Seconded. All in favour? Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Item 2, any declarations of interest? As it's a hybrid meeting, if a member has a pecuniary interest, they're requested to vacate the council chamber for their item. The member can return to the council chamber following the completion of that item. No. Item 3, planning applications to be determined. Trouble with that. The director has submitted 7 items to be determined. The benefit of the public here tonight, the speaking arrangements for planning are as follows. The officers will summarise the report. Registered speakers will be invited to speak in the following order: objector, supporter, parish or town councillor, ward councillor, applicant or agent. All registered speakers will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, apart from the ward councillor, who may speak for up to 5. In the event that all speakers are against an application, as chair, I may grant the applicant or representative a time extension. And I would respectfully ask members of the public who have not registered to speak to remain silent throughout the proceedings. With that, we go on to item 3A, land south of Mercer Court and east of West Horton Road, Adlington, pages 7 to 46. Ian's going to present this item, which is to approve the application subject to conditions, and I have 2 registered speakers, ward councillors Alistair Bradley and Peter Wilson. Ian, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 7 buildings comprising 14 light industrial business units located to the west of the railway line at Adlington and to be accessed from Rawlinson Lane via Mercer Court. Members will recall that this application was presented to the committee on the 10th of August, where a decision was deferred in order to allow members to undertake a site visit, which took place prior to this meeting. The application site is a long, narrow strip of land most recently used as a site compound for Network Rail and is previously developed land. The proposed development will be contained within the settlement area, where there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out in the framework and the Chorley local plan. The proposed units will be of a modest scale and somewhat traditional design style and will be laid out in a linear pattern following the railway line, which is considered to be a suitable form of development appropriate to the character of this location. The application site is bound by residential development to the west, and there are dwellings on the opposite side of the railway line to the east. The proposed buildings themselves are not considered to result in any adverse impacts on the amenity of the occupiers of these dwellings, given their scale and design. It is noted that there are concerns have been raised in relation to noise and disturbance from the use of the site. Noise assessment was submitted in support of the proposal, which has been reviewed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer, who raises no objection. Notwithstanding this, the definition of light industrial development under Class EG of the use class order defines this as any industrial process being a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smells, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit. On this basis, it's not considered that there would be any unacceptable impacts on residential occupiers through noise or any other form of disturbance. The site will be accessed from Rawlinson Lane via Mercer Court as it is presently. LCC Highways consider that this would be an acceptable arrangement that would not be harmful to highway safety, subject to the provision of a suitable scheme for site access and off-site works of highway improvement. A number of concerns have been received from residents occupying properties to the west of the site with regards to surface water drainage. A flood risk assessment has been submitted in support of the application, which has been assessed by the Lead Local Flood Authority. This proposes that surface water is discharged to Ella Brook, which has been accepted by the Lead Local Flood Authority at this stage, subject to the provision of further details and a detailed final drainage strategy. The development would provide the economic benefits of employment generation whilst providing the social benefits of comprehensively redeveloping previously developed land and eliminating an unrestricted use of the land to be replaced by development that provides the opportunity to be controlled through planning conditions. Overall, the application is considered to be acceptable in accordance with the development plan and is recommended for approval subject its conditions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Bradley? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I've got a cold on the hottest day for a long time, so I am told. So if I'm a bit croaky, I apologise. Members of the committee yourself, Chair, would not be surprised that I made points on behalf of residents at the last meeting regarding this application, and therefore the same views are being made again tonight. Members have had a chance to visit the site themselves and see the particular linear nature of this site. It borders a lot of other residences, private residential properties, and is a long, thin site alongside the railway line. It has an existing approval, as noted in the report, for 7 houses, which residents, while they may not want that development, accept that a residential development in a residential area is suitable. What they are saying, though, to myself, and they have repeated representations both before the last meeting and since, about reasons they have for objection to this industrial development proposal. That's issues that we've already had from the officer about traffic, around noise, around nuisance, around flooding. Obviously, members will not be surprised to know that some of those are not backed up by the expert reports, but as we all know, those reports can quite often be at odds with residents' experiences. But residents have supplied me with pictures of their gardens running with water, so there is flooding down there as an issue. They provided evidence of damage to property and noise from previous use as a rail yard, which again would be nuisance if replicated under this proposal. Therefore, they are urging this committee to listen to them, who will have to live with this site for the next number of years, and to reject that commercial stroke industrial application. And not least, Chair, following the last meeting, a number of residents has expressed concerns by comments made by some members of this committee about what's the issue. There's no change from what it previously was. Previously, this was a rail storage yard used occasionally at certain times to store materials, i.e. for the works on Skew Bridge. It wasn't used for a continued industrial use, which is this proposal we currently have before us, and it wasn't the intensity that this site will be developed out as under this proposal, if approved. And therefore, some residents have given me over 25 years experience of being the neighbour to this site. They've provided evidence of previous issues and previous problems that would be replicated under an industrial usage. Damage to walls, noise, and all the rest. That will not be issues under the residential application that's currently extant on this site. And therefore, I am confused and perplexed as to why this proposal would come forward when there's an existing use that would be sympathetic to the neighbours, maintain the amenity of those neighbours, and reflect the nature of this area. Not just for the residents of Mercer Court, not just for the residents of Danesway, Kingsley, and all the other areas that border onto it, but even the residents of Fairview across the railway line who will have to watch and look at this site for the next few years. So, Chair, I would ask that members of this committee listen to the residents who are going to be aboard this site, who are well experienced in living with this site. They're not averse to development. In fact, they would welcome the residential development that's currently outlined and approved, has been approved by this committee previously. But what I would, Madam Chair, urge is refusal of the application as currently presented on the grounds that the proposed development would result in increased intensity of activity, in particular from vehicles accessing the site with great regularity via Rawlinson Lane and Mercer Court, which would result in undue noise disturbance and would be harmful to the amenity of neighbouring residential occupiers, and therefore would be contrary to our policies EP3, EP4 and BNE1 of our Choi local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Just to obviously support Councillor Bradley's request to the committee that they do reject this proposal for the reasons outlined, and just to back up that point, Chair, that members would have seen on the site visit the layout of the site and how it is to be accessed, but what they won't see is the impact in terms of the noise nuisance. And it is very true to say that yes, it has been used by Network Rail, but it is not being used continuously day in, day out, 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night and beyond. It has not been built out, and therefore, of course, in relation to the flooding that Councillor Bradley referred to, I appreciate that is not going to be a ground for refusal because of the report we've had from the Flood Authority, but it is a reality which residents live with on a day in, day out basis in the winter with the heavy rainfall. We've seen the videos, we've seen the pictures of driveways, gardens being completely overrun with water. I cannot see how this application will make that any better, irrespective of the so-called mitigation that we've put in place. However, to focus on the reasons for refusal, it will, of course, result in more vehicles accessing the site and increased activity. That will result in a loss of amenity for the residents. And while I appreciate the reports from the officers references this, but it comes down on the view that it should still be approved, we would argue that that needs to be looked at again. It is a very grey area when we look at things such as noise and disturbance and the amenity of our impacts on the neighbourhood, and therefore I'd urge members to object to this proposal as it is contrary to policies within our local plan, EP3, EP4 and BNE1, as Councillor Bradley outlined. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Over to you, members. Councillor Morwood.
I'll make a start. I did go on the site visit. I didn't know the area before. It is a very long, narrow-looking site with a narrow entrance, residential. 2 new houses being built just alongside the current residential properties, which seems to fit in quite well at that point. But I am minded to rethink. I was all in favour of it before, but having seen it and listened to the arguments and looked at it, I am starting to change my mind. 7 houses were approved. 7 industrial units are coming up, which look very much like houses, but of course that's got nothing to do with the reason for refusal, but it's interesting nevertheless. Residential properties, there'll be a bit of panic in the morning, traffic going out and back at tea time, traffic going in. But this particular option, they're going to be in and out all day. Noise, pollution and so on. No idea what kind of industrial units they're going to be, so I don't know if they're going to be wholesale or retail or mixed. So just have the vision of cars being parked all over the road, people trying to get in and out of that narrow gateway just past the sort of main entrance. It just doesn't seem to lend itself to that kind of development. So at the moment, looking to be against the recommendation, but we'll hold fire for other people's thoughts. Thanks.
Councillor France.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was sort of open-minded about this, but when I sort of arrived and saw the cars parked diagonally in the entrance, I sort of thought to myself, yeah, you can get a car through here, but can you get an heavy goods vehicle through? Even a van? And my own thoughts were that, yeah, I think residents are obviously using those diagonal spaces. The gate is very, very tight. So I think on those grounds, I'd like to propose that we turn this object to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Derbyshire.
Okay, I noticed it was just outside of the area of Mercer Court. It's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and that restriction is there for a reason. And even then, it was quite busy, and people were going while we were there, and that was 3:30, and it was still quite busy. And the bridge there is also quite tight. So, and it's on a slight bend. So if you actually stood, if you're trying to pull out from there, you would have difficulty. And I know they're talking about moving the wall, but even if you're then turning left, it's on a slight bend, so you'd struggle to see what was coming around there. So I was, and I've never seen the site before, never been to the site before. So it was quite an experience. And what I noted is that the houses that are being built would fit in with the environment. And it's quite environmentally friendly, isn't it? It's quite a nice place to be. But if you've got these industrial units, it's almost going to change the area's map, if you like, itself, and it's going to become residential. And the difference between that and then a pathway that leads to an industrial estate, which is effectively what it would be with 7 units on there, albeit a small one, it just changes the whole usage of that area. So for me, I would be very mindful that I would object to it. It's okay.
Councillor Boardman.
It's a difficult one to judge, I'm afraid. I don't really like applications like this that come forward to us with our expert officer's recommendation for approval and then so much weight and comment against that approval. It is a difficult one. So I didn't go to the site visit, but I do know the site very well. I do know Rawlinson Lane quite very well, actually, after cycling up it several times on the weekend. It's a very steep hill. So I definitely go slow going up there, and I can see the entrance. And the entrance is small and it is narrow, actually, in that position. What concerns me, though, is that, yes, we do have residential concern, and we are always sympathetic to residents' concerns in this committee. It also worries me a little bit that this application, although 7 houses have gone in the past and could easily be built as of tomorrow, these are for light industrial units. And I think we, as a committee, have to get used to the fact that in the future we're going to see more of these applications where very small light industrial units come forward within residential areas because there simply isn't enough of them in the country and certainly in our borough. People are looking to work closer to home. They're looking to downsize from going to the cities. They want smaller places to work. So, it's difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises now as it is to find current space to rent or to buy. So, yeah, we do have to look at the economic impact of these applications. It'll come down to weight in the end with the argument, as Adele will tell us. How much weight does one thing carry against the other? And so I'm minded to vote with the officers on this one. I'd like to put it forward for approval.
Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a problem with redevelopment of an industrial site, but it shouldn't be at any cost. This, by the very shape of the development, borders multiple houses all the way down. It's like a long, thin area of land. And I have concerns about the type of vehicles that are going to be going down there. These are going to be commercial vehicles. And at what time are they going to be going down there? There's going to be an increased amount of noise. So I do think it would be harmful to the amenity of the local residents, and I do think it, for that reason, it is contrary to policies EP3, EP4 and BNE1, so I would like to therefore propose refusal on those grounds. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Heaton.
Press the right button. Thank you, Chair. I've seen the site and I can see it would be ideal for either houses or light commercial units. And it will be light commercial vehicles that use that site, not heavy goods, as somebody was suggesting. Maybe to get materials in, but that would be the same if it was houses. I think that it is appropriate for light commercial. The site is, and I'll second Councillor Boardman's proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Berry.
I'd just like to back up Councillor Derbyshire and Councillor Hilton's concerns about the site. I just don't think it makes best use of the land, and I'm quite more reassured about the housing development than anything. And whilst we've not got the ability we have no regulations about noise, I just feel that it's just going to would become an increase in eyesore and be detrimental for the residents with the noise, which we can't mitigate. There's nothing there for us to actually put in conditions, so I'm mindful for refusal.
And policy. Our report in front of us, paragraphs 46 to 55, address these issues, and I'd just like to ask the planning officer present tonight if they can just
explain to us how the application site is in breach of those policies when the documentation in front of us says it isn't.
And through you, Chair. Good evening, everybody, by the way. I think what members will appreciate is that this is our assessment and our consideration of how the application needs to be assessed against the provisions of the policy, and we have concluded that it's compliant with policy BNE1. But committee will also be aware that it's within their gift to come to an alternative viewpoint. And you were quite right when you said before it's about weight, and it's about whether the potential harm outweighs the benefits of the development. I've listened to the debate and I've listened to the ward members who have spoken, and there's obviously two propositions before members this evening. It's very important that members are clear in terms of refusing it against the policies that have been cited, because there's been some discussion about potential highway safety, there's been some discussion about potential noise issues, but from what I understand and what Councillor Hilton proposed, the concern is about the intensification of the use and the increased levels of activity and the additional comings and goings. It is quite a unique site insofar as it's very narrow and it's very long, so any vehicular movements at the junction particularly will be in close proximity to the existing houses. So whilst planning policy and government guidance allows for commercial uses in residential areas, every application needs to be considered on its own merits against the provisions of the development plan. We have taken the view that it is acceptable, but it's within committee's gift to come to an alternative viewpoint if they feel that there is harm in terms of that increased level of activity, in terms of comings and goings, additional activity. There are conditions suggested that would ameliorate that level of harm to some degree. But we all know that there will always be the occasional van that comes outside the specified hours. It is, in terms of its appearance and its character, from a character point of view, I would say that it would have the character almost of a residential development. So I don't necessarily agree that it would have a poor appearance and would necessarily detract from the area. But I do hear the concerns about the increased levels of activity, and that is a judgment that needs to be made. And our judgment is there isn't the harm, but likewise there is the alternative viewpoint where you may consider that that harm does tip the scales, particularly given the constraints of the site and the narrowness of the site and the close proximity of houses, given that it's bounded around the whole site. The only thing that I would add, at this moment in time, whilst the site may have been used for ad hoc purposes by Network Rail, there are no restrictions on that being used as a yard on a permanent basis 24 hours a day. I think that's unlikely, but we just need to be mindful of that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you. I've listened to the arguments. I think I'm persuaded by the arguments against this, and I'd like to second Councillor Hilton's proposal for refusal.
I have a proposer and a seconder for refusal. I'll take the amendment first. All those against, in favour of refusal of this application, please show. Okay, Tom. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, Taz.
Chair, members have decided to refuse the application for the reasons outlined by Councillor Hilton. The development causes harm to neighbouring property by virtue of the increased level of activity of vehicles coming and going, which will cause intensification and will cause harm to the amenity of residents in the area, contrary to policy EP3, EP4 and BNE1.
Thank you. Okay. If you wish to leave now, you can. Okay, moving on, item 3B, 12 Langton Close, Eccleston, pages 47 to 70. Adele's going to present this item. The recommendation remains to approve the application, and I have one registered speaker, the objector, Paul Bamber. Paul, can you hear and speak?
I can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you. Adele, can you present your report?
Thank you, Chair. Again, members will be aware that this application was deferred at the last committee to undertake a site visit, and members visited this afternoon prior to this meeting taking place. You'll be aware that the application site is located on Langton Close within the settlement of Eccleston, and the existing property is a modern detached dwelling house with detached double garage. Langton Close itself is a cul-de-sac, and the property is located at the head of the cul-de-sac. Planning permission is sought for alterations to the existing garage, including increasing the height of the walls, raising of the ridge height, an extension to the front and conversion to habitable accommodation. A single-storey front extension is also proposed, in addition to a single-storey rear extension with a balcony above and other associated external alterations. 3 representations have been received, which raise a series of objections, including concern about impact on amenity through overlooking, loss of privacy, shadowing and reduction of daylight. Also, concerns are raised with regard to impacts on parking and highway safety. Members will be aware that the application is recommended for approval, and there's nothing in the addendum to report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Paul, would you like to speak now, please? Task,
Yes,
you want to start the timer?
Okay, thank you for allowing me to raise my objections to the planning application for 12 Langton Close, Eccleston, on behalf of myself and my wife, who reside next door at number 11. Our only objection to the plans are the rear single-storey extension containing a balcony. I would like to refer to the planning considerations document. I believe several of the points will be breached if planning is approved. Section 12 states, in many cases, balconies are unacceptable. They should be designed into the fabric of the property. We believe a screen that is 9 foot wide by 6 foot high will be unsightly and have an adverse effect on the visual amenity from our kitchen and son's bedroom in particular. Section 16 mentions overbearing impacts, and as mentioned above, due to the sheer size of the proposed balcony screen, we believe this will be overbearing and unsightly. Section 17 mentions loss of light, which will clearly occur in our kitchen and son's bedroom. Section 18, the SPD states balconies or terraces which lead to an unacceptable level of overlooking or are visually intrusive are unacceptable. Therefore, if the committee are to pass this part of the application, this makes accepting the proposal as the exception rather than the rule. If a 9 foot by 6 foot screen, not 3 to 4 feet away from our boundary fence, is not deemed visually intrusive, then it does beg the question what is. Our son's bedroom, which is nearest to the proposed extension, already stands 13 feet back from it currently. Extending it a further 9 feet means it will severely affect his visual amenity and natural light. Section 31 mentions there will be limited traffic. However, as stated by a person before me, number 12 sits at the head of a cul-de-sac, which is a main turning area for residents and visitors alike. And as you can tell from the site visit today, with work vehicles present at another house, congestion was clearly apparent. There's also a children's play area that's not been mentioned next door to number 12. We bought this house as our forever home and stretched ourselves to our absolute limit to get it. The stunning views were a huge selling point for us. We suspect the applicant also enjoys those views, which for them will remain unaffected, whereas for us, they'll be significantly impaired. I would respectfully request that the committee deny this application based on the reasons that I presented to you this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Over to you, members. Councillor Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. When this came before committee in the last cycle, I asked for a site visit, and I'm grateful for members that were able to come and see today the site visit. Similar, as I said last time, to one that we went to in Horton, slightly different in that there's a projection of the existing end of the house at number 12. It is a ground floor extension, but then there's a balcony above with, as has been described, with a 9-foot, 8-foot screen above, which will severely lead to a loss of amenity for the residents at number 11, both in the kitchen area and in the bedroom area that the objector just referred to. This business of the 45 degrees business was referred to at the last meeting, and when we saw it today, members who went on site visit could see that this would have a really detrimental effect on what's being proposed. It's called a single-storey extension. With the screening there, it's effectively a 2-storey extension because it's going to be habitable. It's going to leave a loss of humidity, loss of privacy, overbearing impact. The issues that the objector related to regarding car parking, because the garage is being turned round a little bit as well. So I think, I just think it's somewhere in this report, which is a very detailed report, it talks about on balance. In my view, having been on the site today, the balance persuades me that it's not acceptable, Chair, and I would therefore propose that it be refused.
I've got a frog in my throat tonight, sorry. I'll start by saying, in principle, I've got no issue with the rear extension, ground floor rear extensions, and the additions thereof. It does tidy up the back elevation of the house. I note from the photographs there is an existing small steel balcony that is currently on the existing rear elevation, which comes off the actual same French door in the rear gable. I do, however, have an issue with the balcony in the roof terrace, and I do have an issue with the loss of amenity for the neighbour. We see a lot of these in the industry, and I'll be honest with you, they are always controversial because a balcony always leads to overlooking. And for someone that lives on an estate and had an extension built next to them that created huge overlooking problems, I can say by first hand it's not very pleasant. So I would be minded to refuse this application based solely and purely on the balcony, which is a shame, really. And if we could address that balcony with regards to a condition, I don't know if that's even possible, which is an amendment to the drawing, or we can delay the response to this. I would be happily approve it if there was, for instance, a Juliet balcony as opposed to a roof terrace. So that's my view. At the minute, I'll have to refuse it, but I'll ask for Adele's comments on maybe a detailed condition.
Thank you, Chair. It wouldn't be possible to condition out part of a development as part of the grant of a planning permission. It needs to be determined on the basis of what it is. A condition can be used to secure obscure glazed screens. I would just remind members about what our adopted local plan and household design guidance says in respect of how we assess applications. I accept that it's a single-storey extension with a balcony, and therefore it's not necessarily appropriate to assess it as you would a single-storey extension. But the guidelines that are set out in terms of the 45-degree guideline are in order to protect the amenity and to ensure that any impacts are not so severe that they warrant refusal of an application. And the council's adopted guideline for a 2-storey extension. So if this was a 2-storey extension with a solid wall and a roof, providing it doesn't project beyond a 45-degree line taken from the rear window, it would be policy compliant. And in this instance, the drawings that have been submitted demonstrate quite clearly that that built form is wholly in accordance with our planning policies. So in terms of impact on outlook, then it would be very difficult to demonstrate that that would be so severe. Again, there are existing windows in the rear elevation, and the reason the screen is proposed is to ensure that the overlooking doesn't take place from that balcony. So in kind of like fixing the problem of the overlooking, it creates a taller structure, but in itself, that taller structure is compliant with policy.
Councillor Gabbard.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Adele, for clarifying that. And I think it's said in point 22, and that's explained. But I am inclined to agree with Councillor Whittaker on this one. And it does state there on balance, it's the opinion of the officer that it wouldn't be significant to warrant refusal. But I think as the objector has pointed out there, that there is going to be loss of amenity to himself and obviously his property, and it states there that there will be loss of ambient light. And for me personally, I'd second the refusal of this application. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I did second the site visit at the previous meeting. I was unfortunate I couldn't get down to either of the organised ones, but I have been down to see the site from the rear garden. The two houses, the objector's house and the applicant's house, are slightly staggered. So the objector's house is further forward and the applicant's house is further back. And even so, the extension would only comes inside the 45-degree, even in that case. So I personally can see no problem with this application. So I propose we accept the application.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still trying to get my head around it. And my initial thoughts are that, yes, if it was a two-storey building, it'd still be approved. And Adele is right to say this screen seems to have made more problems than anything else. But correct me if I'm wrong, the loss of light, I couldn't see it. The sun seemed to be coming from left to right. There was plenty of light, and I think I'm in the right directions. So I really couldn't see any loss of light there at all. The screen, as I say, I can't quite get my head around it. It's 9 foot by 6, so that they can't overlook. In the current balcony, you can look out over the next door's garden now. They'll just be 3 meters further forward and looking hopefully more outward down the bottom of the garden rather than to the side. Whereas at the present moment, you come out the balcony and you would be looking immediately left straight into the garden, whereas you'll be 3 meters forward and more inclined to be looking beyond the neighbour's garden, if only slightly to the left. So on balance, I'm thinking I'm going to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, Adele, if you would.
Thank you. There is another option of deferring it, maybe to seek a reduction in the balcony. So rather than it being a 3-screen projection, we could put that to the applicant if members felt that that would be an acceptable solution and overcome their concerns. Because at the moment, the balcony projects to the end of the extension, and we can seek a discussion with the applicant to see whether that is something they would take into consideration rather than actually determining it at this stage. That's another alternative proposition I just wanted to make you aware of.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to propose deferral for the reasons given by the lead planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adele. I mean, I do have concerns about the screen. And yeah, I think that would be a good suggestion to come back and try and reduce that. That would be my principal problem with this application.
Sorry, I didn't hear what Alex said. I couldn't hear what you said, Alex. Just then.
Sorry, I was saying I'd like to propose deferral for the reasons set out by Adele.
Chair. Yeah. Obviously, I'll go along with that deferral. What I think people, I'm disappointed in some of the comments that came, but that's by the by, that's up to individuals. But what people recognised on the site visit is the proximity of the houses. It's a straight extension of the gable end, if you like. The balcony is there. If it was a single-storey extension, you wouldn't be able to do it. But it's going to be a walked-on balcony. It's going to be severely impact on the resident. If what Adele is suggesting is that we defer it to see if there is some compromise that can be made by either insetting the balcony somewhat, so that it takes it a little bit away from the extension of the side of the house, that's fine. But the loss of amenity, in my view, is, as we've often said, we've got to look at the application before us. The loss of amenity that will be suffered by the people at number 11 is significant. But if the members want to go along and ask for a deferral, I'll agree with that.
Deferral, please, Chair. And make a recommendation that when the discussions are being had between the planning office, that the balconies move to the central section and the glass lanterns move to the terrace section.
Yeah. So I'm not even to be able to bother with the other. All those in favour of deferring this application for those discussions to take place, please show. Any against? Oh, sorry, counted everybody. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. Members have decided to defer the matter on the basis that they would like a site visit. Thank you, Chair.
No.
Sorry. On the basis of the deferral for reasons given by planning officer. Sorry.
Nearly deja vu then. Sorry. I know. Okay. Item 3C, land surrounding Highton Terrace, previously at Valley Place Farm, Bolton Road, Adlington, pages 71 to 88. Adele's going to present this item. That planning permission is granted subject to conditions, and there are no registered speakers. Adele.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief on this one. This application is a Section 73 application which seeks to vary conditions relating to the approved plans. Members will be aware that this development has been completed for some time and is wholly occupied. As a kind of result of checks and balances, it's been identified that there were certain aspects of the development that have been built not strictly in accordance with the approved plans, and some elements that have been omitted, including a footbridge link. We're satisfied that actually the footbridge link doesn't actually add to the quality of the development and doesn't need to be completed. So it is a straightforward application in terms of just regularising the plans to reflect what's actually being built on site. Thank you, Chair.
You, Councillor Boardman. Councillor Fran, I think he's thirded as well. Anybody else wish to say anything? All those in favour of the officer recommendation, please show. Any against? Councillor Whittaker, any abstentions? Yes, he's in favour.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to approve the application unanimously. Thank you.
Drawn. Moving on to item 3E. Crompton Butchers, 229 Eves Lane, Chorley, pages 97 to 114, with an update on your addendum. Although the recommendations stays the same, that planning permission is granted subject to conditions. Adele's going to present this item, and I have one registered speaker, the Ward Councillor James Nevitt. Adele, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application relates to a vacant terrace property located on Eves Lane. in Chorley within the Eves Lane South local centre. The property was most recently utilised as a butcher's shop, and the first floor is in residential use, accessed via a staircase at the rear of the property. The application seeks planning permission to change the use of the ground floor unit from a retail use to a restaurant and takeaway, and for the erection of a flue to the rear of the property. The proposed hours of operation have not been supplied. 2 representations have been received citing issues such as lack of parking, late night disturbance and odours in the surrounding area, and issues relating to the attachment of a flue impeding access, the cost of building insurance and property values in direct relation to the upstairs dwelling. In addition, a petition has been received with 18 signatures raising concerns regarding the impact on parking, as well as 1 letter of support. In terms of consultations, no objections have been raised by LCC Highways or the Regulatory Services team at Chorley Council, subject to control over the extraction system via the imposition of a condition. The property lies within the settlement boundary and within a defined centre where this type of development is encouraged, and where it doesn't impact on the vitality and viability of the centre. The proposed flue would be located to the rear of the property on the back wall, and it would be screened by adjacent properties and the side elevation of 1 Kershaw Street, and it would not protrude above the ridge of the property. Therefore, any impact on the street scene would be minimal. The application property lies within a mixed residential and commercial area, and as I said a short time ago, there is a flat at first floor. A noise report submitted in support of the application concludes that a mechanical ventilation system could be installed at the property without detrimental impact on neighbouring dwellings, subject to a number of criteria being met, and these criteria can be dealt with via the imposition of conditions. The flue would extract odours 1.69 metres above eaves level, and as such these would be dissipated above the level of any habitable room windows located in the rear elevation of the adjacent property. Again, regulatory services have raised no concerns with regard to odours. Whilst no proposed hours of operation have been put forward, these can be controlled by a condition. The lack of restrictions on the lawful use of the property and the existing mixed nature of the surrounding area must be taken into consideration, and on this basis it is considered that with a suitable condition relating to hours of operation, the proposed use is acceptable in terms of any neighbour impact. No concerns have been raised by LCC in relation to parking or highways, and again the proposal is in a sustainable location and shared bays are available in proximity. There is an update on the addendum that sets out the concerns by the owner of the flat rather than the occupier of the flat, and there is an additional condition because, as members will know, the grant of planning permission isn't a grant to do works, and if an owner of a property is not going to allow the attachment of a flue, then alternatives would need to be provided if the consent is to be implemented. So on that basis, there is an additional recommendation, an additional condition recommended requiring the details of the full extraction system. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Nevitt.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, serious concerns about this application have been raised in relation to parking and road safety. The highway safety report provided here is unrepresentative of the situation on the ground. In paragraph 23, which you'll find on pages 99 to 100, it sets out that there is no dedicated parking. However, the property is located in the established commercial and residential area of Eves Lane. The reality is there is no parking available at all. The unrestricted bays this paragraph refers to are currently occupied by the many businesses we already have, assets to the local area which are, at present, expanding and their needs are growing. As is laid out in paragraph 23, this property lies directly behind a pedestrian traffic light crossing with zigzag markings either side. This is supposedly included as a reassurance that proper highway safety will be followed with this development, but this is a false belief. Vehicles routinely park on the pavement directly either side of the crossing, completely disregarding any markings. Vans park right up to the traffic light. Residents have shared with us instances where the crossing itself has been blocked by cars. We cannot have confidence that the crossing prevents dangerous parking, either in relation to this property or other businesses on Eves Lane. At best, it merely offloads parking to other areas, notably street corners, whether at Kershaw Street or Pennine Road, which are unable to take this burden, further imperiling road safety at these junctions. Paragraph 23 goes on to say that there are bollards on Kershaw Street and on the adopted highway. However, this is not preventing dangerous parking, but making it worse. Cars are currently parking either with one wheel on the pavement, as the bollards are set back from the curb, or entirely in the road, at times completely blocking the top of Kershaw Street. Delivery vans are unable to get through. During term time, we have families who rely on taxis to get their children safely to school. The taxis were unable to get through. One resident told us how, because of this senseless parking, an ambulance could not reach his house to assist his son, who suffers from epilepsy. An ambulance was unable to get through. We all know how takeaways operate in Chorley. We live in the age of Just Eat and Deliveroo. In most places, when delivery drivers pull up, often on double yellow lines or in the road, it is far more of a nuisance than a danger. It is a temporary annoyance easily forgiven, and who here doesn't order a takeaway from time to time? But in a bottleneck such as this at Eves Lane, what occurs in one place as a minor inconvenience would unfold here as an acute hazard. Further, this application makes provision to open a restaurant. Without additional parking, where are their customers supposed to go? Are they supposed to park at the front of people's houses, taking up their spaces? Perhaps the establishment is to come to some sort of arrangement with a driving test centre across the way, or maybe to utilise the back lot of Kenyon's Funeral Care. Colleagues, the assessment that has been given to you is, in the very least, detached from reality. The few and far between mitigations we receive from LCC highways, such as the bollards currently in place, count for nothing without enforcement. This creates a boon of confidence for careless drivers to block roads like Kershaw Street or jeopardise pedestrian crossings. Eves Lane is not a secondary residential area. It is a busy main road. When Chorley expands, so does its traffic. It is common to have cars, vans and pickup trucks parked on the curb corners, limiting visibility to a handful of feet. Unfortunately, it isn't too long ago that there was a road traffic collision involving a motorbike directly outside this property, as a consequence of the dangerous combination of increased traffic and senseless parking. I do not want to wait on the next email from LCC Highways telling me that there has to be a fatality before anything can change. It is in the interest of husbanding the businesses we already have, looking out for our residents, that I present these concerns here. None of us should want to make an already problematic situation worse. It is my hope you will take these concerns into account and reject this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on anything else? Over to you, members. Councillor Gabbett.
Thank you very much, Chair. I used to live on Cobden Street, which is the next street over from this proposed takeaway. And what the ward councillor, Councillor Never, has said is 100% correct. It's a main road, probably one of the busiest in Chorley. There are regular collisions at the top of Eves Lane. Notably, I've been not involved, but been aware of at least 3 or 4 that have been serious. And again, as mentioned with the delivery drivers and obviously people coming to attend, there is no parking there. The parking bays are used by residents, usually because there's not enough parking on the streets themselves. And the zigzag lines outside of the takeaway, excuse me, would be parked on, and I think it would create more risk to the public, especially in the ward, and cause more collisions. However, I'm sympathetic to officers in that we have to take the lead from the Highways Authority, which is LCC, and what they say. But quite frankly, I think everybody on this committee knows that they have been wrong in the past, and it seems to be the generic thing is no objections raised. I think it was only 6 months ago they said there was no objections raised, then changed their mind to yes, we object to this. because they actually looked into it. So I would be minded to propose that we defer for a site visit so members can get an idea of the actual area in question, and hopefully in that time LCC may review this themselves and actually look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns are more about the restaurant. A restaurant on Eves Lane without a car park. I know Eves Lane very, very well. My wife grew up on there. There are a number of takeaways on there, some close to crossings, and 2 and 3 in one row. Yes, there is some hazardous parking, but it's for a very limited time. But a restaurant without a car park, I'm not getting that one. Thank you.
And thank you to the Ward Councillor who spoke very well about the highways issues in the area. I think we as a committee always have to be mindful about what potentially could happen to that unit now. Let's say I owned a painting and decorating business. I could walk in there tomorrow and open it up, and I'd have tradesmen stopping there every 10 minutes to buy provisions. Now that can happen without planning permission. So I'm a little bit sceptical about the increase in traffic issues. Yes, the shop is closed now. However, the shop could reopen tomorrow as absolutely anything that could do with retail. There is no issue with that. This is a takeaway restaurant, and like you, Councillor France, I have more issues with the fact it's a takeaway than a retail unit. And I think the applicant, good luck to them to get an extract unit put on the road of that building. I can't see that even happening. And the hours of trading are quite restrictive as well. I also agree with the Ward Council about the way that the businesses takeaway business operate in Chorley. It is all about delivery and very, very fast food being delivered to your door, which unfortunately involves a lot of traffic movement with regards to quick stops and maybe mopeds and scooters being used, because that's basically what they use. So I'm more concerned about the fast food and takeaway business than I am about the traffic issues. I am concerned that, well, I'm not concerned at all that any other retail development could open up there as of tomorrow. When it comes to weight, I don't think we'll have any grounds to stand on if we don't approve this based on highways issues, because as we've seen, LCC haven't made any comment, our own planning officers haven't made any comment about that. So I'll be minded to approve it and give the applicant best wishes to get the permission to put the duct up the rear of the property.
I'd like to second the site visit.
Or retail use, a restaurant and hot food takeaway. So they are intending a restaurant, are they, for officers? Yeah. Okay.
Is it please show? All those against? Right visit. Well, that's it, we're going to site visit.
Through you, Chair. So members have decided to defer the matter to allow them to go on a site visit. Thank you.
3F, 5 to 7 New Market Street, pages 115 to 140. Ian's going to present this item. I have no registered speakers. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the change of use of the upper floors of 5 to 7 Market Street from ancillary retail storage space to 8 residential apartments. Only minor external alterations are proposed to the building and no extensions. The site is located in a prominent position on Market Street in Chorley Town Centre, next to the existing market. The building is currently vacant, and the proposal would not alter the existing retail use at ground floor, whilst the provision of dwellings to the upper floors would bring an active use to underused space and would help support the vitality of the town centre in accordance with policy EP6 of the local plan. There'd be no impacts on neighbour amenity, whilst the conditions for future occupiers will be adequate. The reuse of the building itself would result in a positive outcome considering its character and current state of disuse. It is noted that no off-street parking is proposed and that the location is within a pedestrianised area of the town centre. The location is, however, considered to be a highly sustainable one. Secure cycle parking will be provided and LCC Highways have raised no objections. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and Section 106 agreement to secure a public open space contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Application for a town centre. People seem to want to live in town centres more than what they used to. They either work there or they travel to the station or bus station. So I think I move the application.
As we've said numerous occasions, we'd love the first floors of lots of these redundant retail units to be converted into residential to bring some vibrancy back to the town centre. I would make one comment though, the one comment only, is that all this accommodation is first and second floor and there is no disabled access to those floors. There's no lift on the plans. Now, I'd just encourage the applicant to maybe put a lift in so that maybe elderly or disabled could use those apartments. Correct.
Yeah, just to clarify something, has there been planning permission for the ground floor on that for put in for coffee restaurant or something? I believe I heard about it somewhere. I don't know. I can't remember whether it's come through.
Yes, through you, Chair. There's no proposal to alter the use of the ground floor as part of this application. It's possible that a licensing application may have been received by the authority, and in order to change the use of those retail units at ground floor to a cafe or restaurant, you wouldn't actually need planning consent to do that because they fall within the same use class. Apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, it does appear that we've received a separate application to change the use of the ground floor to a cafe. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't form part of this proposal, Councillor G, but we have received a proposal to make that change.
Through you, Chair, with the building, the second floor and other one, it wouldn't make any difference with the cafe downstairs then. Yeah, appreciate that, but I just hope that it's where I'm quite happy with what it is. Can I just finish it? Sorry, I'm quite happy with what it is, but I'm just concerned that it's in a very close parameter to get there's not much room to manoeuvre around there. That's all I'm trying to get round.
Yeah, you'll be mindful that the government has changed legislation and introduced a lot of relaxations to the planning rules, and that basically means now retail units can be changed to a raft of different uses, either as permitted development or by a lighter touch of a prior approval application. And we had a prior approval application earlier this year to change the shop to a cafe. So that has been determined on the basis that prior approval is not required. And I think in a town centre use, I think there's a general expectation that amenity levels will be lower than they would be in a wholly residential area. And given that this consent already exists and it could be used, it would be very much a case of caveat emptor for any future uses on the upper floors. But it is important that those upper floors are used to ensure the vitality and viability of our town centre. Thank you.
Just quickly, I agree with everything said, and I'm no problem with that. I just wanted to make sure people knew that there was a difference there, that's all.
Thank you, Chair. In light of the previous conversation, will there be sufficient noise insulation for the residential properties above this, what could be a noisy restaurant?
Through you, Chair, that would be dealt with through building regulations.
Councillor Marwood, I'm trying to move on.
Oh, no, can't possibly allow that. I hope the members will
Desperately.
be equally as interested in the resident above the restaurant, previously a butcher shop. So I hope they will take all that they've just said into consideration when they're discussing that, because there was no discussion on the, sorry to go back on that, but there's absolutely no discussion, and I was as much at fault about the resident above that particular restaurant, but we'll come back to that next time. I've only one comment to make, and that's not another coffee shop. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Was it really worth? Oh, I thought we had. I've got Councillor Bowman. Yeah, I have. Oh, I have a proposal and a second. All those in favour of the officer recommendation, please. So, even though Taz doesn't believe me. Okay, any against? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to unanimously approve Plan Commission subject to conditions and the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement in respect of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Item 3G, 2 Oak Drive, Chorley, pages 141 to 170. Ian's going to present this item, and it's recommended planning permission is granted subject to conditions. I have two registered speakers, the objector Phil Loynes and the ward councillor, Councillor Adrian Lowe. Can you both speak and hear?
Yes.
Excellent. Councillor Lowe?
Yes, Chair.
Excellent.
Yes, Chair.
Right. Ian, can you present the report?
Yes,
please?
thank you. Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a two-storey building comprising 8 single-bedroom apartments along with associated infrastructure following the demolition of the existing building. Members will recall that a previous application for a building comprising 10 apartments was refused by committee on the 23rd of March this year, as it was considered to be out of character with surrounding development by reason of its size, scale and massing. The application site comprises a vacant care home building located within the core settlement area of Chorley on a private drive adjacent to the A6 M61 Link Road at Blenheim Way. The site has previously developed land in a sustainable location where there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out in the framework and the Chorley local plan. There are no policies in place that will protect the retention of the care home or the existing building. The proposed building will be of a traditional form with some contemporary window features and would be faced in red brick. It would have a smaller footprint in comparison with the existing building that would be replaced and would have a similar eaves and ridge height. Overall, the building would be of similar, if not slightly smaller scale. The application site itself is not a prominent one, being screened by dense landscaping from Millennium Way to the north and set back from the head of a cul-de-sac at Rowan Grove to the south, whilst Oak Drive itself is a private road. As such, public views of the site are limited. It's noted that the existing site suffers a sense of abandonment, and the proposed development does have the potential to improve that appearance. In relation to the impact on the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, it's noted that there's already an impact from the existing building on the site. It's considered that the proposed development would have no unacceptable detrimental impact on residential amenity in consideration of the current situation, subject to the inclusion of some obscured glazed windows and the provision of an appropriate boundary treatment scheme. The council's parking standards will be met, and LCC Highways have assessed the scheme and raised no objection. It is therefore considered that the proposed development would not have a significant impact on highway safety, capacity or amenity in the immediate vicinity of the site, and there would also be some secure bicycle storage on site. There are no ecological concerns in relation to this site, and the site doesn't fall within an area of flood risk. As such, a number of surface water drainage solutions could be implemented as part of the development. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, I'm Phil, I live on Linden Grove, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of the Hartwood estate, many of whom have come to me to speak on their behalf, and some of them managed to do it via the appropriate means online. as this application is, has been mentioned, essentially a revision of a previously rejected application, albeit with 8 instead of 10 flats, many of the same objections apply and bear repeating, especially as the members of the planning committee have changed. There's been multiple times in the past where sewage underneath Maple Grove, Linden Grove and Rowan Grove had needed freeing. Adding 8 flats to this would not help that situation. There's also been problems until recently with rats. That has been solved, but having communal external industrial sized bins for the flats would encourage that again. And that would be placed directly next to number 3, Oak Drive. The main issue, however, is parking and traffic. Just want to echo some of the comments from some of the councillors regarding LCC's approval of everything. Historically, there has been issues with dangerous parking on Maple Grove, with commuters and local workers parking all along it. Double yellow lines have been put in place recently, but that has just pushed people further into the estate. Although there's 14 parking spaces proposed, anybody who's been to Buckshaw Village or the Gillibrand Estate would see that parking surrounding flats just seems to encroach on local residential roads. The current plans for number 2 don't allow adequate turning space for delivery vehicles, Amazon drivers, bin lorries, emergency vehicles, or visitors to number 3. There's no turning space, no turning circle. There'd be no space for ambulances specifically to turn around in that street, considering that the current residents are elderly and disabled. The entrance onto Maple Grove is met by vehicles leaving the M61 onto Millennium Way at considerable speed, going down to 20 miles per hour in just a matter of meters. And there's already multiple misses on almost a daily basis on this junction. An increase in traffic with vehicles going out of Oak Drive onto Millennium Way would inevitably increase the risk of accidents. Just to echo Councillor Bradley's comments from earlier on, residents don't object to residential developments in the Hartwood area. And there's been many in recent years. You'll have approved all of them. But this proposed plan, it isn't consistent with the local area. 8 properties in the space of what would be appropriate for 1 or 2 should be rejected. And for the reasons that I've outlined, residents of Hartwood area would like to ask for this to be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak as one of the ward councillors, but also as a local resident of the Hartwood estate. I've got a feeling of deja vu because, as Ian's mentioned, it was only quite a few months ago that the previous application came to committee and was rejected after a site visit. But I am aware that there are a lot of new and different members sitting on this committee this evening, and since it was last discussed and may not be too familiar with the area, my views as a local councillor have not changed. Some way is included in the report, but it is important to give all members of the committee some perspective to this site. The application is basically a resubmission of the previous application rejected for 10 dwellings, but this one in front of you is for 8 dwellings with parking and infrastructure following the demolition of the existing building. It is in the middle of it's the middle of 3 properties in a private cul-de-sac off Maple Grove, and I'd like members just to picture that scene. A private cul-de-sac with 3 dwellings. This is in the middle of that cul-de-sac. The building was a small care home, but has never operated as a care home. And I think it was mentioned last time, the refusal for a care home was because it was deemed unsuitable due to a lack of parking for both staff, visitors, etc., and by its location. So it's never operated as a care home. In fact, members, if they turn to page 73 of the report, show that this particular site has had a checkered planning history and it's remained derelict since the last permission was granted back in 2004. To reiterate, my main areas of objection are the impact on the local area, it's out of character with the area, there are parking and traffic issues, and I'm just going to briefly, through you, Chair, expand upon these. As it is on a small cul-de-sac, it is proposed that all vehicle movements will be from Maple Grove. If this was a single dwelling, I don't think many residents, if any, would object to permission being granted. But for 8 dwellings is completely out of character. The proposal provides for 14 parking spaces, 8 for the occupiers and 6 for visitors. And as Mr. Loynes has pointed out, that vehicles movements would potentially be at all times of the day and night, depending upon who occupies these dwellings. We already have a parking issue on the estate. We have a traffic issue on this estate, and this would just add to it. The proposed parking spaces would, in my view, impact unfairly on the occupier of number 3 because for the reasons of the turning point at the end of the cul-de-sac. Paragraph 37 of the report acknowledges problems affecting the local highway network, in particular the construction phase, but I have to repeat, traffic and parking is horrendous on this estate. I am concerned over the impact on the general area, not only along Maple Grove, but as been mentioned on Rowan Grove as well. I've got 2 observations, Chair, for members, and it's one, would you like this proposed 8 dwellings next door to you if you lived on a very small private cul-de-sac? The second observation is that should the council not be more consistent in its approach on planning matters and against inappropriate development? I remind members why the previous application was refused, and I'll read it in its entirety. It was due to, by reason of its size, scale and massing, would result in overdevelopment of the site and would be out of character with surrounding development to the detriment of the appearance of the locality. For those reasons, Chair, I urge members to refuse this application for the reasons previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, members. Somebody out there. Councillor Morwood, Councillor Eaton.
Chair, I don't know the site. This would seem an appropriate time to suggest a site visit, which I do not like normally, but I think this would be appropriate. I don't know the site.
Councillor Boardman.
Sorry, Councillor, he said I won't be supporting that recommendation this time around. We've seen this site come up several times now. It was refused for 10. It's come back for 8. So I'm going to ask the residents, and I'm going to, sorry, Phil, what do you want to see there? Because something is going to happen there eventually. One residential dwelling, as Councillor Lowe mentioned, is never ever going to wash on that site. I was just trying to track the map service from Lancashire County Council to see if it is actually a private cul-de-sac or is it an adopted road. Tell me that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, it is a private road.
Private road.
Oak Drive's private. Yeah.
Property owners on that road have a responsibility for that road. That's a private road. So the owners of the site also have a responsibility for that road. So I'm looking at it thinking, okay, you know, we as a committee have to sit here and look at the application in front of us. It's a new building with 8 apartments in it. It has car parking spaces quite clearly shown on the plans, which our officers have stated meets our policy. The officers were quite specific in their comments and in the conditions that they put forward, and I'm still struggling to see a problem with it, perfectly honest with you. I voted for it last time at 10. We do need more of these multi-occupancy buildings in Chorley. we do need smaller dwellings, and these are for individuals, smaller families, and people that start on the housing ladder. So I'm quite sympathetic to people that want to put these type of buildings up. So I would fully support the officer's recommendation, move for approval.
Yes, I've been to this site. I do appreciate what Councillor Eaton's saying. He hasn't. And I do also appreciate what Councillor Portman's saying, that something has got to go on this site. So I will second Councillor Eaton, from the understanding that there are a number of members who have not been on a site visit. I've been myself, have a certain amount of sympathy. Something's going on there, Councillor Boardman. I agree with you.
Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. I have been on a previous site visit to this, and it's currently a bit of a mess at the moment. I supported it last time. I'm going to support it this time. I agree with everything Councillor Boardman has just said. I think with the location of this, it will be helpful in attracting much needed staff to the local hospital services. And from somebody that's gone through my training in hospitals, that is essential. And I think it's a really important part of being able to recruit staff to have such accommodation locally. So in terms of the parking, the officers have clearly stated that it meets the council parking standards. I have no issue with this, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor Boardman's proposal for officer recommendations. Thank you.
So on the grounds of consistency, this committee refused the previous application. And it seems to me like a bit of a try-on to knock it down from 10 to 8. Doesn't make any difference. If we want to be consistent, then we ought to be consistent and refuse it. If there's a proposal for a site visit, I'll support that, but I'll not be convinced about the desirability of this application. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to remind members that the reason the previous scheme was refused was because you were concerned about the size, scale and massing of the building, and because of its impact on the character of the area. This revised proposal is a reduced, the building is reduced in size and scale, such that it's actually smaller than the existing building now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I have to come in. It's a difficult one for me. It is in my ward, and I absolutely understand where residents are coming from, and the ward councillor has spoken well on their concerns. But I am torn. Rats, yeah, I'm not surprised at rats. The place is dilapidated, it's run down, and something has to be done. It is unlikely that one small family house is going to go on there. The residents that live there have lived with that previous residential care home for the last donkey's years. And I believe it might have even involved the residents that actually live there, in the design and so on. It's sat there for years, and it's a blight on that part of the estate. No turning circles for bin lorry. I presume the bins get emptied, so something must, they must be able to access it at the moment. I'm not quite sure about who owns what. I'm not sure that it's all owned, each part is owned by various residents at either side. I have a feeling that the whole thing is owned by one resident, so that might create problems. But it started off at 14, it's come down to 10, it's come down to 8, and they've reduced the size. Somewhere along the line, something has to give. Sadly, I'm in a position where I am torn between my ward and the residents and what has been proposed. And I'm still not decided, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, Taz?
Thank you, Chair. So committee have decided to grant planning permission subject to conditions in respect to the proposal applied for at 2 Oaks Drive, Chorley. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that ends that. Item 4 now, the appeals report. Short one, pages 171 to 172. Adele, anything to say about our success?
No, very proud of you. This is the only appeal. It was the application that related to the Royal Umpire Caravan Park, and I think members will recall that it was refused contrary to officer recommendation. So the inspector has agreed with us.
Councillor Whittaker.
Sorry, did Adele say that it was an officer recommendation to approve it? Really? It just goes to prove.
Yes.
Yeah, it just goes to prove that planning is not an exact science. Yeah. And can I warmly welcome the inspector's decision? And if anybody wants to know why, I'm quite prepared to discuss it outside this meeting because the applicant behaved in a disgraceful way.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's the end of business today. Sorry.
The officers working what they do, improving and suggesting that we don't approve applications as well, just to add to that comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.